Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celesta Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and I come on to talk about different things that we go through and help you think about ways to process it. Now, this is episode 2 out of 5, right? So, if you are coming in on this episode and you haven't seen episode 1, which is Healing the Inner Child, I suggest you go there. So, I'm doing a 5-part series where I am talking about the inner child and I'm breaking it down and I'm giving homework assignments. So head on over to episode 1 of this series so that you can hear that one first. And I will make sure to put the link for this into the show notes. So you did your homework assignment. If you didn't, it's okay, right? You had the option to do a journaling prompt or a visualization of what your childhood looked like. So that's going to be important, right? And again, this journey that we're going on is a lifelong journey. And the goal behind this journey is to help you understand yourself better, right? There's a book called What Happened to You. I read it. It was Oprah Winfrey and a psychiatrist. I think his name is Bruce Perry, but they go through different scenarios and they talk about different things that go on in children's lives and how they affect them as an adult, right? So a lot of times people just feel like this is just how they are, not understanding how their childhood has impacted who they are as an adult. And today we're going to talk about exploring childhood experiences and how they impact us as an adult. This may feel heavy, right? A heavy topic, it's okay, right? Remember, like I said in the first episode, it's okay if you have to take a break. It's okay if it feels too much. This is a podcast is streaming on YouTube and it's on all podcasting platforms. The beauty of this platform is that you can come to it at any point. It doesn't have to happen or you're going to lose it, right? So today we're going to discuss exploring childhood experiences and their impact. Um, so we're learning about how our experiences shape our beliefs as adults, right? And learning why this is crucial for healing your inner child, right? Again, this is a topic that is so important to me because understanding my childhood trauma and how it affects so much of my life has allowed me to heal, has allowed me to create peace in my life. It doesn't mean that I'm never triggered. It doesn't mean that life doesn't happen, but I feel like I have the tools to deal with the things that come up for me in my life. So let's start with formative experiences, right? And if you know me, I'm a very visual learner. So if you want to head over to youtube.com, you can get the visuals for this. But these are experiences and periods of life that have significant and lasting influences on your character and your attitude. So the impact, right? So there are some impactful things that shape and can mold you. So major life events. So like if a parent passes away as a child, or a challenging journey can require you maturing faster and having more independence. Or, some people have been parentified, right? Parent may have struggled with mental health issues or substance use issues or wasn't there, and they had to become the parent, right? They never really had a childhood, right? So that experience of their parent or caregiver not being able to provide for them caused them to kind of become more of an adult quicker, right? And so maybe as an adult, you're more independent. You struggle with asking for help because getting help in life as a child was not something that you had access to, right? Now, another example, right? Growing up in a supportive family can foster resilience and a positive outlook on life, right? So it's important for me as I talk about the inner child stuff. I do want to acknowledge that there have been some good experiences that people have had, right? Some negative struggles, right? Experiencing abuse, neglect, or abandonment can lead to long lasting mental health issues, right? Again, in these formative years as we are growing up, even culturally, right? Sometimes some cultural norms can create some systems within us. For example, let's say, like I know in like Haitian culture, um, women are kind of expected to have a child, take care of their partner, take care of the house. And maybe that's not something that you want, right? but you're struggling because you're in a situation that you don't really want to be in. So those some of those foundational things that have taken place growing up in a Haitian household where there's these cultural norms, one might not say like that. How could that have harmed me? It's not necessarily like specifically that harming you, but kind of like it's creating a psyche about you, an identity that may conflict with what you want, right? So those are just some examples. So, how are formative experiences carried into adulthood, right? Because that's something we talked about what the formative experiences are. And this is important for me to kind of like talk about because even on my first session with people, and we'll go through kind of their history. So, I'm always like checking in about somebody's history, about what's going on in the now. And what happens is, I'll help people make some connections on what's going on in the now and what's happened in the past. And people will say things like, yeah, but that was 20 years ago, right? And so there's this disconnect where we don't understand that just because something happened 20 years ago doesn't mean that 20 years later we're not affected by it, right? It's important to remember that your experiences will always be a part of who you are, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. Because if you're not consciously acknowledging it, some of your behaviors are acknowledging it, the way your body is responding to the stress that's on your body, the choices that you're making or not making for your life, right? There are ways that the thing that you're not choosing to deal with, how it's going to show up in your life, right? And I'm hoping through these 5 sessions that I'm doing on this podcast, you allow yourself to really reflect and think about your life and how this content plays a role in your life. So some of the ways that formative experiences are carried into adulthood. So there's this emotional residue, right? These emotions are things we cannot see. So the inner child carries unprocessed emotions such as feelings of abandonment, rejection from childhood into adulthood. It happens all the time, right? Personally struggle with abandonment issues, right? So in my relationship, I would have these moments of feeling abandoned. And until I was able to work on myself, you wasn't telling me anything other than what I was feeling. Those feelings felt true. I didn't even have language to identify what I was feeling, but my responses was clear that there was this abandonment going on, right? So there's emotional residue that can track, right, up 20 years later, where you could be a whole adult and you have these like childlike responses because what's happening is your inner child is coming up in those moments where you may feel fear, but you're trying to figure out, why am I responding so heavily, right? Why am I doing this? Why am I in this cycle? Another way it's carried is our belief systems, right? So I just talked about this, but core beliefs formed during your formative period, such as feelings of unworthy due to neglect, continue to influence adult behavior and self perception. Behavioral patterns, this is important. Listen up, people. So you may unconsciously repeat patterns from your formative years. So, for example, avoiding conflict to stay small, right? Like in your childhood, if things came up, or if you had a parent that may have been not consistent, right? They had a bad day, they come home and all hell breaks loose, right? And so you learn like, I'm not gonna say nothing. I don't want the conflict. Maybe I need to speak up and I need something, but I'm not gonna ask for what I need because I don't know what I'm gonna get when I speak up. So, for example, avoiding conflict to stay small and not upset others, a strategy used in a conflict ridden childhood can persist in adulthoods. So, what happens is you go through that as a child, you become an adult, and you're at work and you're working with the coworker, you're working on a group project, you're the only one doing the group project, you're not speaking up. And so the coworker is thinking like, "Oh yeah, Celeste got this." When in fact, I'm pissed off that you're not helping me with this project, but I'm also not speaking up because I don't want no conflict. The person that my counterpart may not even have done anything to make me believe that they would be upset or come at me, right? But because of my own stuff, I'm suffering in silence and I'm doing this group project by myself and it's coming out really well. And then me and my counterpart are both getting credit for something that I've done. And I am very resentful towards that person, right? So that's a prime example on how something where you've avoided conflict as a child can translate into something that can happen as an adult, right? And the last thing, which is so huge, something I personally have struggled with, and I work with a lot of people on this, and I like relationships are my thing. I love talking about relationships. So relationship dynamics. So wounds to the inner child can lead adults to form relationships that echo past experiences, such as seeking a parental figure in a partner or entering a relationship that lacks emotional availability. And it's what's crazy is like, especially the last part, lacks emotional availability. You are yearning for that emotional like connection, but then you engage with a partner that does not provide that, may not have the capacity to provide that, and you're like attracted to that, and you're trying to figure out, why am I so drawn to this person when this is not what I want? I wish logic and emotion would match up. I just wish it would make life so much easier for so many of us, but it doesn't, right? Being with somebody that is emotionally available to you may feel hard. It's crazy. I know, right? It's so crazy. But because you're not used to an emotional available person, right? So we're using an example of somebody who may have had a caregiver who was not emotionally there for them. And so they find themselves in these cycles of relationships with partners that are not available because it's very familiar to you, right? So just because it's familiar to you doesn't mean that it's good, right? And if you're not mindful, you'll find yourself in this cycle all the time. I'll give you an example. I remember I worked, so my start in my career was at a homeless shelter. And I remember this guy, he was in there for like 10, 15 years. And housing would come up, he would decline it. He just got used to being at the shelter, leaving during the day, like no matter cold, like never had a problem with this dude. Leave when it was time to leave, came back, no issues. And so finally, like somehow they got him into the bed. He went and they got him an apartment, and he decided to go. And he gave up the apartment because it was so unfamiliar. Somebody like me, I would prefer to be in an apartment versus being in a shelter on bunk beds. But this was very familiar to this person, and so that's the route that they chose, right? And so when it comes to something that is very hard that we experienced in life, you'll be surprised that some of your patterns are reflecting the pain that you've been in, not because you consciously want to be in it, but because you haven't processed this stuff, and it's going to show up in your behavior and your choices that you're choosing to make, right? And this is an aha moment for a lot of people when I work with them and I share this. They are very shocked, and it's like, okay, it makes sense. So when people talk about their patterns, people be like, how do you work with adults? And it's so easy for me because I realize like nobody grows up and says, hey, I want to be in an abusive relationship. Hey, I want to struggle with my finances. Hey, I want to struggle with my kids. Like nobody grows up that way, but there are so many things that go on in our lives and it goes unchecked, right? Um, the next thing I want to share is the impact of trauma neglect. So trauma is an overwhelming event or experience that an individual cannot process, leading to a disruption in their ability to cope, which can negatively impact your emotional regulation, relationships, and self worth. You and I can be in a car accident, and I can come out and I'll be like, oh, that was crazy, right? And kept it moving. No intrusive thoughts, nothing, right? You, on the other hand, same car accident, right? But you, on the other hand, may find yourself struggling with sleep, struggling with a lot of trauma behind what happened because the way you processed it was different than the way I processed it, right? And sometimes, and most times, trauma that we've experienced in childhood a lot of times has gone unprocessed. So what's happening is just calculating in our mind. It's calculating in our mind, and it's becoming a part of our psyche and a part of our identity, and we don't recognize it. Another example I'll give you, if you are at a movie theater, there's a scary scene that comes on, bam, the scary scene's over, you're going back to life, right? Now let's use that scary scene as an event that happened to you. The event happens, life goes on, But what's happening with your mind is that event feels like it's happening over and over again when it goes unprocessed, right? So scary how it happens. I've said this before on the podcast, but humans are the only people that can create stress, hormones, our cortisol levels spike. We create all of this activity with just how we think about things. So you don't even have to be in the middle of a traumatic situation and your system can feel that way, right? It's so scary to think about. And I recognize that a lot of times we struggle because of this. So, what constitutes trauma? So trauma is not just a stressful event, but one that's too overwhelming for you to process. So there's abuse and violence, right? Sexual, emotional, domestic, and neglect. There's sudden catastrophic events, right? A violent assault, serious accident, death of a loved one, long-term adversity, so childhood neglect, ongoing abuse, unstable living environments, right? I think about people who I've met that have like grew up in another island, came here at like 12 or 13, and whole new environment, whole new language, just everything. And I was like, that's traumatic. Like, right? People don't even recognize like their first time in the US was a traumatic thing, especially because a lot of times nobody talked to them about what was going to happen when they came here or that they were coming here. They just knew they was on their island. Next thing you know, they was here in America and it's cold, right? So, a lot of times things have happened and it doesn't make your caregiver a bad person, right? When I talk about this stuff, I have this book called Adult Children of Emotional. I'm going to put it in the I'll put it in the chat. I mean, I'll put it in the show notes, but Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And a lot of times when I talk about this stuff, and people be like, no, my parent, blah, 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 it was good. And it's not talking bad about your parent, but let's face it, some of our parents lived in survival mode, so they didn't have the capacity or the wherewithal to know how to be there for us emotionally or how to recognize signs that was happening in our lives, right? I feel so grateful that I have the capacity and the knowledge to be able to understand what's going on and articulate that and work with my children. I always tell people being a mom is one of the hardest jobs for me, because there's a lot of ways that I break in cycles in my family. And so I'm the first to do it, right? So it's a lot harder, right? So sometimes I'll second guess myself. I'm grateful that I have a partner that I can talk to about this when it comes up. Because being a parent, you're dealing with healing your inner child while trying to parent your children, right? And it's hard. I have a lot of empathy for parents. So me and you kind of talking about this with yourself and understanding some of the ways that things have happened is not to like shame or talk bad about that person, your parent or caregiver, but it's just to have a better understanding on what's going on. And so neglect, right? So childhood neglect is the persistent failure of a caregiver to meet a child's basic physical or emotional needs. While often less visible than physical abuse, neglect is the most common form of child maltreatment. It can have equally, if not severe, developmental consequences. So we know about like kind of like the physical abuse and emotional and sexual, but neglect is something that we're not, it's like, okay, so physical neglect, so failure to provide adequate food, clothing, or shelter or supervision. Let's say your parent had to work all the time. Let's say your parent struggled with putting food on the table. Doesn't make your parent a bad person, but there was some neglect there, and it wasn't like your parent's fault a lot of times. So sometimes people grew up in situations where their parent may have been a single parent, their other parent left, right? And things changed in the household. That literally happened with me. And it's important to understand, like, yes, there was neglect. Neglect and abuse are two different things. But it's important to understand that for yourself so you can understand, oh, I'm struggling with this because there was a lot of neglect because my parent didn't have the capacity to do that or they didn't have the means to do that. Look at everything that's happening in the world now where they're trying to change food stamps, where they're trying to just change Section 8. Like, there's going to be kids that are going to be neglected, not because their parent doesn't love them, but because of the way that the society is being shaken up. Emotional neglect is huge. A lot of adults I work with talk about this, right? And again, A lot of our parents grew up in survival mode. They don't even know how they're feeling. They're just trying to get through the day. So they damn sure wasn't asking you how you're feeling or how your day went. I know some people who may have gotten bullied in school and the parents like, oh, just ignore it, right? And not recognizing the ramifications it has on their child's psyche, right? We're talking about things we can't see, so it's really hard to conceptualize it for people that haven't even done it for themselves. So it's important to understand, like, oh, those moments that maybe I had those hard experiences, not having somebody to talk to or validate my experience has created this system or psyche inside of me that's created these abandonment issues that I have now as an adult, right? And then there's medical neglect and educational neglect. So failure to provide proper medical, dental, and mental care, or educational, not a lot, failure to provide school age children with education. And again, these things could happen because of numerous reasons. So understanding what's happening is different than blame. There's no, it's not saying, oh my God, we're not pointing fingers. We're just understanding ourselves. Okay. So as you're listening to this, it's not about blame. It's about understanding. Um, okay. So, we talked about trauma. Okay. Now we get to the self-reflection, right? Because we're at the end of this episode and we have talked about a lot of heavy things, right? And so again, there's 2 weeks in between. And again, even though the next episode is going to drop 2 weeks later, doesn't mean you have to listen to it right away. But I do want you to reflect, and then I'm going to give you some homework. So I want you to take a moment to think about your own experiences, even as you're listening to this, right? What are some significant memories that stick out for you? How do these memories influence your current beliefs and behaviors? And then are there patterns in your relationship that stem from your childhood experiences? So now that you've kind of learned a little bit about some of the ways that our formative years has affected us, some of the ways that neglect or trauma may have sit in our system, are there things that you can point to that you can say kind of has affected you in some kind of way? And how it may look like in your relationship, right? So those are some things I want you to reflect on. Your homework assignment. Again, you can make this part of your homework assignment. I want you to write about a childhood memory and how it makes you feel today, right? There's like 4 different things you can do. If you want to do all of them, that's fine. Um, but write about a positive childhood memory and how it makes you feel today. Right, that's good because yes, there has been pain in life, but there has been some good experiences. And you, if you know me, you know I want to like let's gravitate towards that. Let's talk about that too, right? Let's create some balance in some of the ways that we're thinking. Reflect on a challenging experience and how it shaped your beliefs on yourself. And again, we're on YouTube, so if you want to read this out, like look at it, you can. Identify any recurring patterns in your adult life that you believe stem from your childhood. Another great thing to do is creating a timeline of significant childhood events and noting their impact in current beliefs and behavior. So this is something that I do with my clients. Get a timeline, and I actually like the first session. I'm like emailing them the content on what they said so they can see what they said, and have a better understanding and look at it and be like, oh snap, right? So that's a powerful thing you can do is this timeline piece. So I just want to remind you that this process can be an emotional process, but a important step towards healing. The reason why it's important is because if you lean into the hard things, the things that you don't want to talk about, it's no longer going to control you, right? Does there have to be a timeline in how you do these things? No, there's not, right? But I do want you to think about like how this can help you, but I also want you to be aware of your capacity. If you're working with a therapist, this is great to bring to your therapy session. If you're not working with anybody and it's too much, put it down. It's okay. You can always come back to it, right? So what's next, right? We still got 3 more episodes in this series. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about recognizing and nurturing your inner child. And then after that, we'll be talking about healing techniques and strategies. And then our last session in the series will be about moving forward and integrating the inner child. Um, Again, I want to give this thing lifeline. If you find yourself struggling, 988 lifeline. So you can call, text, or chat. It's confidential, judgment free, right? And then there's also texting home to 741 741. You can connect with the crisis counselor. Obviously, if you have a therapist, great way to do it. If it's an emergency, obviously 911, right? Go to the emergency room. But a lot of times, people are struggling, not where they feel like they need to go to the emergency room, not that they're going to harm themselves, but they just need somebody to talk to. And so these are really good lines for you to utilize. And if you want to find me by searching Celesta Therapist. You can find me on all social media platforms. You can also find my wellness center. I have a wellness center called Shifting the Way You Think, because, if we work on shifting our thought process, we can actually find ourselves feeling different, feeling better. And then my website is stwyt.com. That's stwyt.com. You can visit me online and check out some of my classes. And you can also follow me on all social media platforms at stwyt.com. All right, beautiful people. Thank you so much for rocking with me and on this series. I'm excited about bringing this content to you because it's been an important part of my healing process. And so let me know what you think. You can always email me at celestev@stwyt.com. Until next time, I will talk to you later.